What a good way to start this year. First Sunday morning of the year, we're coming together to worship our God. We were studying in our class downstairs about angels, and we had earlier studied how God had told his servant, God will send his angel before thee. That's when he went to get a wife for Isaac. He said, God will send his angel before thee. He says, you just go find the wife. And we don't read about the angel, but the angel was there. We read about how that Abraham going up to sacrifice Isaac. And Isaac says, well, where's the sacrifice? And Abraham says, God will provide. When he got there, an angel had a ram that was in the thicket. And so God had provided a sacrifice. It was not going to be Isaac, going to be the angel. And then today we're talking about how that, I think about 5 times, Moses was told us how God's angel had gone before the children of Israel as they came and brought them out of Egypt through the wilderness into the promised land. What are we talking about? God providing for them, going before them, making a way, his angels. In Hebrews, they're ministering spirits. Now, don't be looking around thinking you're going to catch a glimpse of your angel somewhere. That's not what it's talking about. But God provides. And one of the ways that he does this is in some way that he didn't have to explain to us. Some ways he's using angels. And I like to think of going into 2025, how that the angels have gone before us into this year. And we're going to have a good year because of God. Well, there's a song we sing, I know not who holds tomorrow, but I know who holds tomorrow. Well, I know not what may be tomorrow, but I know who holds tomorrow, and I know who holds my hand. So what a good way to begin this year, thinking we're going to go through this year. Hand in hand, we'll walk each day. God's gone before us, and we will be ready for whatever this year brings. And that's somewhat what this psalm is about. Psalm 60, the title, Through God we shall do valiantly. I want to think about that word. That comes from the last verse of the 60th Psalm. Through God we shall do valiantly. You look that word up. Now, I'm not talking about in the English dictionary. I looked it up in the Greek or in the Hebrew lexicon to see how that word is used. It's used over 200 times in the Old Testament. And it's translated various ways depending on the context. It will do things with valor. Well, that sounds like we do it with courage. But also it says we'll do mightily. We'll do powerfully. We'll do wonderfully. Through God we shall do valiantly. That's not just eking by, is it? That is triumphing as we go forward. Now, as I thought of that word and thought of how David had used that here in the psalm, my mind went to Romans chapter 8, 35 through 37. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or peril, or sword? Go on down to 37. No. Nay. In all these things we're more than conquerors through him that loved us. It's not that, we'll get by. We'll get along. You know, sometimes I just say, we're hanging in there. Maybe I ought to say when people say, how are you doing? I'm going to start saying, I'm doing valiantly. And I know people may not know what I'm referring to. But we do well. And it's not just talking about doing well materially, physically. There's a greater way to do well. It's when it is well with our soul. And we will do valiantly when it comes to these spiritual things. Now it says, he it is that shall tread down our enemies. Now we've got trials and difficulties that are going to lie ahead of us. Satan is our adversary. So we have things that we would call enemies in a spiritual sense. And David did too. But David also had some flesh and blood enemies. He had those that wanted to destroy him and his kingdom. And we're going to see about how David overcame those enemies. We're going to look at this spiritually and see how we overcome. Now, the psalm has one of those superscriptions that leave us a bit mystified. It's to the chief musician. Well, that's a psalm. It's a musical piece. But then upon Shushan Edith. And no one really knows what that means. You might look it up and see, and someone says, upon the lilies, or the music of the lilies. And it seems to be some kind of musical term. Is it referring to some tune, some tone, some mood, some pitch, maybe even some instrument? And it's just one of those words that the meaning of which has been lost to us. Well, if we needed to know, the Holy Spirit of God would have made sure we could have tracked that word down. But we just guess at some of these ancient Hebrew words that are found in these superscriptions. But then it says Michtam of David. Well, Michtam is another one of those words, but one of the common suggestions is that it means golden. And so there's about 6 or 7 psalms that are called Michtam, and they can be classified together and sometimes as the golden psalms. But it's to teach. There's a lesson here for us. That's what we want to zero in on. And then it's going to tell us the background for the psalm, the historical background. When he strove with Aram Naharaim and with Aram Zobah, when Joab returned and smote of Edom in the valley of Salt 12,000. What do you think of when you think of the valley of Salt? Well, that'd be the Salt Sea. That's what it's called in the Bible. We call it the Dead Sea. I think in the Bible it's always called the Salt Sea. But down there where the waters go and there's no way out except by evaporation. But it's very hot and it's very dry. And so the waters evaporate off that sea, leaving all the salts behind. And it's somewhere down in that valley, probably somewhere down in the lower end of that valley. We're talking about Joab overcoming the armies of Edom. And we read in 2 Samuel 8, verses 13 through 14. David gat him a name when he returned from smiting the Syrians in the valley of Salt, being 18,000 men. And he put garrisons in Edom. Throughout all Edom put he garrisons, and all they of Edom became David's servants. And the Lord preserved David whithersoever he went. God had promised long, long ago that the elder would serve the younger. Esau would serve Jacob. And these are the descendants of Esau in Edom, being made the servants of the children of Jacob, the Israelites. So we see that being fulfilled here. And David got him a name. After that, the nations round about are saying, did you hear what David did? They have subdued Edom. And so word is out now that David is subduing his enemies round about. And that's what this psalm is going to be referring to. But the story begins way way further back than this. It goes back to the promise that God made to Abraham. We read it in Genesis chapter 12, 1 through 3. And in that promise, the part I've highlighted here, in that promise, God said that he would send Abraham unto a land that I will show thee. And we read in the book of Hebrews that Abraham obeyed and went out not knowing whither he went. He wasn't sure where God was taking him. But he brought him into the land that became the land of Israel. It was the land of Canaan at the time of the Canaanites, and brought him to Shechem. And there Abraham built an altar. And God appeared to Abraham again, and he said, unto thy seed will I give this land. And so there was a land promise made to Abraham. Well, we'll read about it several times through the book of Genesis, given to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. He's going to say, look to the north, and the south, and the east, and the west. Walk the length and the breadth of it. All of this land I'm going to give thee. And just how extensive was this promise? Well, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, unto the seed have I given this land, from the river of Egypt unto the great river, the river Euphrates. Now, the river of Egypt, we might think, well, that'd be the Nile River. But that's not what this is talking about. There's an intermittent stream from the Sinai Peninsula that flows into the Mediterranean Sea. And it's called a wadi. In other words, it flows in the wet weather. It doesn't flow in the dry weather. And that was what was called the river of Egypt. So about halfway across the Sinai Peninsula, and then all the way to the river of Euphrates. God says to Abraham, I've given you this land. When the children of Israel come to the Jordan River, God says, arise, go over this Jordan, thou and all this people, unto the land which I do give them, even the children of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot shall tread, that I've given you, as I said to Moses. Now watch it. From the wilderness and this Lebanon, even unto the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites, and unto the great sea toward the going down of the sun shall be your coast. Be strong and of good courage, for unto this people thou shalt divide for an inheritance the land which I swear unto their fathers to give them. How extensive is this? Well, here's one map that shows it was a very large portion of land that God would give those children, not just that narrow strip between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. Now, many have said this, or it's come up every now and then, they ain't got that land yet. God's still going to fulfill that promise. Someday they'll get all that land. And the premillennial idea is they'll have it in the millennium. Jesus is going to return and he'll restore Israel and let Israel finally get all the land of their inheritance. I want to show you something that it says here in Joshua 21, verses 43 through 45. The Lord gave Israel all the land which he swore to give unto their fathers, and they possessed it, and dwelt therein, and the Lord gave them rest round about, according to all that he swore unto their fathers. There stood not a man of all their enemies before them. The Lord delivered all their enemies into their hand. There failed not aught of any good thing which the Lord had spoken in the house of Israel. All came to pass. Well, we'll read it again. Joshua 23:14. And behold, this day, I'm going the way of all the earth. That's Joshua. You know, the way of all the earth, that's where we're all going. It's appointed unto man once to die, and after that, the judgment. Joshua knew his time was nearly over. I'm going the way of all the earth. And you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing hath failed of all the good things which the Lord God spake concerning you. All are come to pass unto you. Not one thing hath failed thereby. They had their promise. All they had to do was walk out there and take it. Now, how much of that they took advantage of is not specifically said in this book, but we know it was all theirs for the taking. God did everything he said he would do. He fulfilled that promise that he made to the patriarchs, that their seed would have all of the land. But there's something else he said we need to take note of. It's the next two verses. Joshua 23, verses 15 and 16. Therefore it shall come to pass that as all the good things are come upon you, which the Lord your God promised you, so shall the Lord bring upon you all evil things, until he have destroyed you from off this good land, which the Lord your God hath given you. When ye have transgressed the covenant of the Lord your God, which he commanded you, and have gone and served other gods and bowed down to them, then shall the anger of the Lord be kindled against you, and ye shall perish quickly from off the good land which he hath given you. God's going to keep his promise. I told you I'd give you the land. Okay, you got it. You want to keep it? You want to keep it? You keep my covenant. Because just like I said I gave it to you, so also I've told you I can take it away. And you're not going to keep the land if you don't keep my covenant. And you know, in spite of that warning, they turned from God and served the idols that the people of the land had worshiped. They wanted to accommodate themselves to the culture in which they found themselves, and rather than maintaining that faithfulness to God, they just picked up what was around them, all the gods around them, and God raised up the nations around them and brought them into bondage and scattered them. And through the books of Judges, all the way up through the reign of King Saul, the children of Israel are harassed by the nations that are round about them. And they have been confined now, not from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, but for the most part, they're simply in the hill country before you get to the coastal plain that goes down to the Mediterranean Sea. And then God raised up David. And one of the reasons God brought David to the throne was to restore to Israel the land that they had lost. That's why we read in Psalm 60, as we begin the verses there, that David is in prayer. He's praying for his people. He's asking God to turn again, be merciful unto us. We have abandoned thee. And that's why God turned from us. But now turn again and be with us, because we're going to repent and be with thee. Listen to this. Psalm 60 and verse 1. O God, thou hast cast us off. Thou hast scattered us. Thou hast been displeased. Oh, turn thyself to us again. Thou hast made the earth to tremble. Thou hast broken it. Heal the breaches thereof, for it shaketh. Thou hast shown thy people hard things. Thou hast made us to drink the wine of astonishment. That is a wine that made them sick. It says in verse 4, thou hast given a banner to them that fear thee, that it may be displayed because of truth, Selah. A banner. get out over the armies, and you've seen the old picture of the armies, and they're holding up a banner. Now we hold up a flag like a banner. Well, they'd have a banner that would flap up in the air, and it would be a rallying point. And David himself is going to be that rallying point for Israel, and he is going to be helping lead those people back to God, so that thy beloved may be delivered. Save with thy right hand and hear me, David prays. And then David starts thinking of all those nations round about, how he's going to overcome them. God's going to help him do that. And so, anticipation, he said, God has spoken in his holiness. I will rejoice. I will divide Shechem and mete out the valley of Succoth. Gilead is mine. Manasseh is mine. Ephraim also is the strength of my head. Judah, I should have highlighted Judah, is my lawgiver. All those are the nations that were places that were allotted to the tribes of Israel. They're all mine now, David says. And from that, he's going to conquer more. He says, Moab is my wash pot. Think of the washerwoman. That's what we're going to do with Moab. And that Edom, well, I cast my shoe. There's something about taking a shoe and throwing it out over the land. That's my land. That becomes mine when my shoe crosses over that land. Over Edom I will cast my shoe. I will, Philistia, triumph thou because of me. He's going to take it all. And it says in verse 60, who will bring me to the strong city? Who will lead me into Edom? Wilt not thou, O God, which hast cast us off, and thou, O God, which didst not go out with our armies? There was a time God wasn't with the armies of Israel, and that's why they'd been driven into the hills. But now, we'll go back out. God will be with us. And so Joab leads those armies into the valley of Salt and overcomes the Edomites and makes them serve Israel. And so the last of the psalm, give us help from trouble, for vain is the help of men. How many times when we get in trouble do we look for the wrong source of help? Well, men can help us, but not the way God can. David turned to God in time of trouble. Now remember, the psalm is to teach us. What's it teaching us? In time of trouble, we look to God for help. Through God we shall do valiantly. That's what we're talking about. For he it is that shall tread down our enemies. Now, David had to deal with material, earthly, physical things. And we do too. We have to deal with those things as well. But more important to us are spiritual things. Because all these things of the earth shall pass, but spiritual things endure forever. We have our own challenges, spiritual challenges ahead of us. But we do not fear. We're going to do valiantly. Look what it says in 2 Samuel 8 in verse 3. About David, he smote also Hadiezer, the son of Rebob, king of Zobah. He went to recover his border to the river Euphrates. In 1 Kings chapter 4 and verse 12, Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms, from the river and to the land of the Philistines and to the border of Egypt. They brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. God kept his promise. He gave it all to Joshua. David recovered it. Solomon reigned over it. Now God has given us better promises than he gave Abraham. And in 2 Peter 1 and verse 4, they're called exceeding great and precious promises. Well, then why are we suffering like we do? Why do we struggle like we do? Well, it says in 1 Peter 1 and verse 6, though now, for a season, if need be, you're in heaviness through manifold temptations. Many kinds of temptations. You might think of that as enticements to sin. That's what temptations are. But also that word temptations are trials. Many kinds of trials. And as you live your life, you find that the trials you face, they change with you as you grow. My parents now in their 90s are facing trials they never faced when they were in their 20s, but they had their own trials in their 20s. And through the years, the trials have changed, and they've overcome them one by one and to this day. And so we're going to have trials in this life, but they're only for a season. And in our time of trouble, we look to God for help. And here's one of those great promises we have. Romans 8 in verse 3. We're going to be more than conquerors. It doesn't mean we're going to just get by. We're going to overcome mightily. And so let's learn from the psalm. That's what it's teaching us. Through God, we shall do valiantly. Now, I want you to remember that when you face your trials, when things are coming up, when things happen to us, when temptations come, when difficulties come. We're going to overcome this. We're going to get past this. This will pass. The things that are great will endure. And we're going to look back one of these days and say, look how well we did. With God's help, we did valiantly. And so let's begin this year with that idea. I'm going to go through this year with God. His angels have already gone before me. And we're going to be strong and of a good courage. And this is going to be a good year for us when it comes to spiritual things, regardless of how it comes out with earthly things. And with those kind of promises, exceeding great, precious promises, I read that. That makes me want to be a Christian. I don't want to live my life any other way. I want to live in the light of those promises and of that glory that is to come. And I want that help in my life. And so I'm going to serve God all the days of my life, all the way to the end. That's what it inspires me to do. And I hope that stirs within your heart as well. So that if you're not a Christian, you'll be baptized into Christ. And if you have been, then you'll serve him faithfully to the end. And you will do so with valor. So if you're ready to respond, you can do it while we sing the invitation song.